rituals, like walk in a circle repeatedly or other repetitive tasks to make the thoughts go away, which is true. Would you think that is a fair assessment?
I guess, yeah, I would. I mean, from the little information that I've got, I would think that's a fair assessment. I would hope that the therapist that diagnosed this knows what they're talking about. Everything that you've described to me doesn't really sound like OCD, but again, like, we're almost kind of offering a second opinion on something, which I don't know if I really feel comfortable doing, because we don't obviously have all the information. But that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, so a couple of pieces on that, especially this part about second opinioning. So this is one of the rare questions that is actually saying, hey, people who have licenses to treat and diagnose problems, would you agree with the doctor or the therapist in my situation and confirm their diagnosis or dispute it? We are reluctant to do that because at the end of the day, when we tell you that we really are licensed people that do psychology, we really mean that. And so we have to start with a caveat of, friend who wrote this, you should absolutely continue to work with your real life therapist who's really evaluating you and is in front of you. However, your question sets the stage for Nick and I to maybe discuss what is OCD and what is generalized anxiety disorder, because we know there's a lot of psychology enthusiasts who listen to our show. So whenever we diagnose somebody with one of these disorders, there's this process we go through called differential diagnosis. Differential diagnosis is how we know the difference between a hippo and a rhino. So if you see like the silhouette of a big gray figure on the African plains, you might say that's definitely a rhino. But we're not sure it's not a hippo. They're similar, but they're different, right? So differential diagnosis is how you squint at it and have different ways of sort of measuring that silhouette so that you can more probably assess whether it's the first thing or the second thing. OCD and anxiety have a lot in common because anxiety is sort of this intrusive thinking and this obsession that can happen that causes physical ailment, right? Or it causes all these other kinds of pieces that you're having to deal with that are becoming intrusive in your life. Obsessive and compulsive disorder is very similar because you're overthinking about something. You can't break your mind away from it. That's the obsessive part, and then you behave in reaction to those thoughts, which is the compulsive part. And that's the cycle that we find you getting stuck in. If you open up the DSM-5 and you go into the OCD chapter, the first thing I want to point out is the writer says, I diagnosed myself as having, quote, real event OCD. Writer, there is no diagnosis called real event OCD. There is only OCD, and there are specifiers like with tics or things like that, or with good insight or poor insight, but there is no such disorder called real event OCD.
Yeah, I just Googled that.
Yeah, that's not a thing.
I had not heard of that.
No.
It's a thing on the internet.
Yeah.
It's not a thing in the DSM-5.
No, that is not something that medicine would describe. Real event OCD is not a thing. And here's part of the reason why your therapist probably ended up going onto the side of generalized anxiety disorder. In the differential diagnosis chapter on obsessive and compulsive disorder, one of the things it talks about to help you figure out, is this a rhino or is this a hippo, is it says, hey, OCD tends to be about almost magical things. It tends to not be rooted in reality. So there's a very prominent person on the internet named John Green. John Green is very open about having obsessive and compulsive disorder. He's the guy who wrote best-selling books like The Fault in Our Stars and Searching for Alaska. And he's got a hit YouTube channel called Vlog Brothers that he does with his brother Hank Green. And he's behind all sorts of really great educational YouTube channels like Crash Course and other great things. He has a podcast called The Anthropocene, and it's just fantastic. So I really like John Green, and he's a huge advocate for mental health, and he lives with obsessive and compulsive disorder. An example from his life to teach you what OCD is, he will go to Chipotle and he'll watch the man making his burrito, and he will think, there's probably invisible flesh-eating bacteria on that carne asada that I am going to eat and it's going to kill me. And now he's obsessing about that thought over and over and over again. And now as he's eating it, he's compulsively wanting to go wash it or wash his hands or throw it away and make another one or throw it away and make another one and do that over and over again. Or he wants to ask everybody there to wash their hands 25 times. That would get so in his head that after he eats the burrito, he feels the need to go vomit it back up because now he feels in danger. He's obsessing about the flesh-eating bacteria. He believes it's possible, and now he wants to go vomit it up, and now he can't eat. So then he starts losing weight because everything he sees, he thinks, oh my God, it might have that flesh-eating bacteria on it. How do I know that that's not true? That is a real thing that can happen. Flesh-eating bacteria does exist. Chipotle is a real place. But it is magical thinking in the sense that it is not probable. You don't have good reasons for thinking this, and it's not rooted in what we call reality. So in the differential diagnosis chapter of OCD, one of the flags they're looking for is is this obsessive thinking about something that has that magical, not realistic quality to it, or did this stuff really happen and you're just kind of stuck on it? In your case, this stuff really happened. These are real things that happened in your human conversations and interactions. You're bothered by it and you are having intrusive thoughts about it. That's well within the scope of what we would consider generalized anxiety disorder. Now, please understand, generalized anxiety disorder is not a lesser disorder than OCD. They are different, okay? Just like a hippo is different than a rhino, but both can kill you. Like, both should be considered a danger to you. So having GAD is not necessarily less. It just means we're going to approach all of it differently.
And as I've said before, I think this is like the most commonly self-diagnosed condition. Everybody feels they have it.
Yes.
Most people, when you actually look at the DSM-5, don't.
Yeah, OCD is something people throw around like I did my dishes too much, or, I insist on only wearing a pair of jeans once before I clean them, or, I have to get my car washed every day, and they'll laugh and say I'm OCD. And that's fine, because we also do the same thing like, I squash a bug and I go, I'm a murderer. Like, it's hyperbolic. I know I'm not, right? And that's fine if we're using it in a teasing way. But there's some people that really sit around and think, oh my gosh, do I really have this disorder? I count the stairs when I go up the stairs. I just have a habit of counting, or I count how many floors I'm on in an elevator. Is that OCD? Again, Nick and I are always looking at, is there a clinically significant amount of distress? If there's not, nope, there's no such thing as a disorder. If there is, then yeah, we're going to get into the weeds on it. Good job seeing a therapist, writer. Good job looking at it. I am not offering you a clinical second opinion. Neither is Nick, because that is not something we would do through a podcast. I am educating you about what is obsessive compulsive disorder, what is generalized anxiety disorder, and what is differential diagnosis. And I encourage you to continue doing your research, but also lean in on your therapist, because the good news is, whatever he offers as far as help and support and techniques is going to be helpful no matter what those symptoms are. With that, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to talk about irrational jealousy. You are listening to Pod Therapy.
Okay, welcome back. And we are going to dive into our next listener mail. I get irrationally jealous when friends hang out without me.
You know who wrote this in? Mindy Kaling. The woman from, she has a whole book called Why Are My Friends Hanging Out Without Me and Other Irrational Fears.
Oh, really?
My wife loves that book.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, okay, well, do we even need to read it?
Yeah.
I guess just read that book. We're good.
Just read the book. We're fine.
All right, I'll read it anyway. I'm insecure and tend to feel jealous/rejected when people choose to hang out with other friends. I realize this is completely unreasonable. Everyone has other friends, myself included, and therefore I would love to be able to feel normal about this kind of thing. Does anyone have any suggestions as to how I can feel more at ease when I'm not someone's first choice every time? To clarify, these friends are good people, we have good relationships, etc. It's not a situation where I'm actively being left out of things.
Good question, Mindy Kaling. Thank you so much for writing in. And congratulations on your hit TV shows.
I knew you were a listener.
I knew she was a listener. So first thought on this, Nick, what a great question to practice CBT on. In previous episodes, we've been talking about cognitive behavioral therapy. And, we've explained a little bit about some of what it does. But underneath this, it's not the event that matters, right?
Correct.
It's her belief about the event.
It's the meaning that she gives the event.
Yes.
Right. So seeing other friends hanging out with other people, it's not that they're hanging out with other people. It's what does it mean to you? What is the meaning that you assign that? That is what's causing this internal struggle, which this is a good thing because that means that the solution is within you.
Yes.
If there's ever a problem to have, we want the solution to be internal.
Yes.
Because if the solution is external, there's no guarantee that we're ever going to get it. If the solutions to all my problems are Jim changing his behavior,
right,
forget it. I'm never going to arrive at a solution. But if my solution is me changing the way I think, changing the way that I see the world, that's awesome.
Yes.
This is good news because that means I'm in control of it.
That's huge.
I can manipulate
And
it.
you could replace some of the pieces of this question. It could have been my boyfriend hangs out with his friends and I feel jealous. It could be my friends in this case. It could be my coworker didn't invite me out to lunch and always seems to invite somebody else. And I feel jealous, or I feel this, or I feel that. Super valuable because it has nothing to do with what this person's doing usually. There's times when we have to address boundaries and correct behavior inside of a relationship. But in this case, Nick's perfectly right. The cause of the clinically significant amount of distress, or the cause of the problem, is your interpretation of the action, not the action itself. So anytime you hear the word jealousy in yourself, that means inherently it's a you thing, and we need to evaluate the meaning that it has. So Nick, in this case, what I hear her saying, what I hear Mindy Kaling, famous TV star who writes into Pod Therapy, saying is, you know what? I feel jealous when my friends hang out without me. I realize that's completely unreasonable. They are good people, but I still feel like I'm being left out. I'm not their first choice. And her question is, does anyone have any suggestions as to how I could feel more at ease when I'm not someone's first choice? So let's offer some of that. One little nugget that I'll toss as far as advice is to evaluate that first concept, first choice. Perhaps it's not first choice, perhaps it's Tuesday's choice, right? Because Nick is a friend of mine in certain capacities. If I'm looking to have fellowship with a friend and what I really want to do today is take our kids to the park and then to a Disney movie, I'm not calling Nick.
Thank you.
Yeah, he puts clothes on his dog. It's very awkward for all of us. He's got this beagle in like a baby carriage, and it's very weird.
I don't know what to do around children.
Yeah, he doesn't know what to do around children. And he comes, we go to the park and he says very awkward things. He says, how about that most recent Disney movie? And it's like, what? So he tries to fit in and he doesn't. So he's not my hanging out with kids friend, but Nick is definitely like a hockey friend, right? Because we both love our hockey team, the Golden Knights. And so I'll text him and talk to him about that. Maybe you're somebody's Tuesday friend, but not their Monday friend. Or maybe you're the friend that they really want to hang out with when they're in the mood to talk about certain things, but maybe you're not their sushi friend. That's another thing, is who's your sushi friend? That's a really big deal.
My sushi wingman.
Yeah. Sushi's a team effort.
Yeah, if you're doing all you can eat, you have to have somebody who can bail you out.
It's funny because I've had that situation happen where I was in the mood for sushi and I went out with one friend and not the other, and we hung out without that third friend. And third friend's like, wow, why didn't you guys invite me? Is there something going on? And we tried to explain, like, no, you don't understand. Sushi's not a social thing. Okay, you're not doing this because you like yourself or you like other people. It's something you do quietly. There's no eye contact.
It's a quest.
It's a quest.
So, yeah, and I that's great advice. The thing that I would encourage our listener to do is take yourself out of the situation and reverse roles. Okay, so you said everyone has other friends, myself included. Mm-hmm. So when you make a decision to hang out with one friend, does that mean that the other friends are less important to you?
Right.
Does that mean that they're not your first choice? Because I think if you looked at it from that situation, your argument breaks down. The way that you look at it, all of a sudden you start saying, well, no, that's not the case.
Right.
So if it's not the case in the way that you think about it, it's fair to say that it's not the case that that's how they think about it.
I agree. Yeah, the same rules apply. And, another piece of CBT that we use for people all the time is we ask them a series of questions to help them process that to come to a real conclusion. So one of the questions we're likely to ask you is, if you had a friend in the exact same situation, what would you tell them? If they called you and like, oh my gosh, my coworkers aren't hanging out with me. They went out without me again. Do they not like me? What's the thing? You would probably tell them to calm down, like, hey, stop. That's not what it is. There's 8 billion humans on the planet, right? And another question we challenge you to ask is this question of evidence. So I often ask you to imagine a little cartoon judge. I usually use Judge Judy. And, ask that judge to weigh the evidence for and against, right? And imagine yourself presenting that evidence and saying, well, I feel like they don't like me. I suspect these things. And the judge going, that's not how courts work, dude. You can't just bring me I suspect that the OJ made the murder. That's not good. You need to show me the bloody glove. You need to show me the smoking gun. Where's the hard evidence beyond a reasonable doubt? Innocence until proven guilty. Prove the guilt of these people. They don't like you. Prove it. Well, they didn't invite me. Okay, did they look at you and say, we don't like you? Have they said something scornful? Have they texted you something mean? Or are they just not available? Well, there's an absence of them in my life. Okay, that's not enough. That's
Yeah,
not enough
that
to
could
convict.
mean anything.
That's not
Right.
enough. But when you put it on trial and you do the pros and the cons and you actually weigh out both sides of the case fairly, more often than not, you'll find yourself feeling relief afterward, and I think you'll take away a lot of those pangs of jealousy.
And my feedback to this may not be specific to this particular writer, but just for all of our listeners out there, if you are evaluating your own thought process, here's a really cool technique too. If you're wondering whether or not your thoughts are grounded in facts or really, what's the word I'm looking for? But like if you can count on them, right? So one of the therapists that I used to work with when we worked with teenagers, he would do this thing with the kids where he would have them, kind of keep track